We left off with creating the user model. So let's just go over the user model. So the user model is what we're going to be using when somebody signs up to our API or application, right? We have 4 properties here. Email is, they're all strings. Email is of type string, must be required, must be unique, must be all lowercase, and that's all the validations we have. We can add the check to see if it's an actual email. That's another one we can do. We'll add that later. We have first name, last name, and then we have password that has type string, required, and a min length of 8 characters. Okay. Then we created the model out of the user, and we exported that user model. And then we created the user routes file, where we created the router object. We eventually will get to the user's controller, and then we exported that user's router. So next thing we want to do is start to create the routes for the user. So we're going to say users router dot route, and then we're going to create the route. So the first one I'm going to create is going to be called sign up, right? And notice I'm not doing like /use.users or anything like that. And this is going to be a what type of request should this one be? A get? Post. Okay? And then let's just directly create the function in line, and then we'll move it to the controller afterwards, okay? So we'll do an arrow function here. It has what 2 arguments does this arrow function have? Request and response. Good. And let's see. We're creating the user, right? So what we obviously need to bring the user model in, right? Let me put it underneath this one. So const user is going to equal require. Where am I requiring from?
User.js.
No, nope. Remember, there's a main file where all of our just the models folder, right? This brings in the index file, and then I specifically just want the user from it. Okay? So I'm going to create a new user on this route, right? What do I need to do to create a new user? Well, first of all, where should the data be coming from? That's not coming. Well, we're gonna take the data and then throw it into the schema, right? So the data that the user is sending from the client, where am I gonna grab that? From the form. What'd you say? The body, right? Where does the body live? Our data's coming from the request body, right? This is where our data's coming from. And we're going to use the schema, right, to make a new user. So how do I use this model to make a new user? I need to make a new user from this model. Pretend it's a constructor function. What would I do if it's a constructor function? No.
Oh, well, you take a parameter of
right?
Username,
which is the request.body.
Yeah.
So our data, all our data is right here in this request body object, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So, like, rec.body equal.
No. Rec.body is going to be the parameters for creating a new user. So how do I use the user model as a constructor? What do I mean by constructor? Like, let's say, for instance, right, I have a function called person, right? That takes in a name and an email, and then I say this dot name is equal to name, this dot email is equal to email, and then if I want to create a new person from this constructor, I say let Tony equals new person, and then I pass in a name, right? And then the email. So how do I? Yeah, exactly. So I'm using this model to create a new user, so it's going to be new user, right? And then the data I'm getting from my server or from the client is going to be the data that's coming from the body. Yeah, exactly. And then I just need to store this into a variable, right? Does this make sense to everybody? Cool. So I'll leave this here as a reference, right? So let's walk through like how is this user getting to the page, right? The user schema. So we're requiring the models folder, which is this models folder. But when we require a folder, what does JavaScript look for? The index file, right? So it's looking in this index file, and this is where we're bringing all our models into, and then this is the object that we're exporting. So we're saying we want only the user model, right? Which is, from this file, the model that we're creating using the schema. Okay, so this creates a new user for us. Now how do I get it into my database? So this gives me a new user based off of my information I inputted in the form that's sent through the body, which is now going to look at the schema and make sure everything matches, right? Make sure that the password is 8 characters long, make sure that the email is unique. So now what do I do to get this into the database?
No.
Save it. I have to save it. I call a method on the new user called what? Dot save.
Dot save.
Good job, Anthony. Good job. Okay, and the dot save has 2 arguments, the error and the actual user that you saved to the database, right? Okay, and then we're just going to say if there's an error, then let's res.json the error. If there's no error, just give me back the user that I saved, right? Cool. Any questions? So obviously, we're not going to be sending back the user. We're going to be sending a token later on, right? Any questions about this at all?
How do you know that rec.body is going to be sticky? What if you have multiple input?
So the rec.body should look like our schema, but you're right. We should double check it, right? Like, even before it goes to the schema, we should double check it. So what you should do is, and I'm just doing this as a shortcut right now, but you should probably do something like this. New user equals new user, right? And then you can say if rec.body.email, right? Then let's make new user dot email equal to rec.body.email, right? You want to make sure it's there. I would probably do something like this and check to see that those values exist, right? Before I start creating everything. So this is one way to triple check your code, right? Because I'm just assuming on line 16, I'm just assuming that this rec.body has all the data that I need. But your code would be a lot better, because what if this doesn't exist? Then I probably want to shoot an error out back, right? Because this is going to shoot an error out as well, though. Why is this new user constructor going to shoot a new error? Because in the schema we said it's required, right? So I'm not too worried about that right now. That it's not going to, this will blow up. So if I really wanted to be meticulous, I would, add an extra check here and say, do these values exist? If it doesn't exist, then I would probably do something, maybe if I wanted that value to be there, I can say like new user email and give it like a default email or something. But we're not going to do that. But good question.
Would you need to use like promises for this?
You can to keep it, because you keep doing callbacks and stuff. You can. I've seen people use promises for all this stuff because we're doing a callback with another callback. You can, but it's not necessary here. And Michael coming out of the gate with all the questions today. You eat your Wheaties this morning or what?
I had a big bowl of coffee.
Okay, so let's test this out, and then one of you tell me what's wrong with this code. So we have to fix our errors first. We did a lot of changing of files and stuff, right? So we need to fix that. But there's something very crucial of security with this code, and see who can figure it out. So let's fix, I think we have a few things we need to fix. I believe it's in our controller. Oh no, it should work. Okay, so let's test out our route. We're going to test out that we can create a new user in our database, right? So let's do that. Where am I going to go? I need to make a post request. I can either be super cool and do a curl in the terminal if I want to remember all that, or we can just open our good friend Postman. Okay, so we're going to mimic an AJAX request that our client would be sending to our server normally. So what's the first thing I need to change? I need to go from what request to what? What type of request? Post, right? And what's the URL that I'm trying to make this request to currently? Localhost 3000. What's our prefix for our API? Oh, good call. Damn, Ted, you're on it. You ate your Wheaties today for sure. Good call, Ted. So we didn't add the user router to the index. So let's do that. And then we need to implement those or create that route in the server, right? So in the routes index file, we're requiring the user router. We're exporting that user router. Then in the server.js file, we're going to bring those routes in, and we're going to attach them to our API v1 extensions. like so. Okay. Thank you, Ted. So now, what is my endpoint? API v1 sign up. All right. Okay. Now we said we're sending this information via the body. So there's Postman gives you this nice little tab to create a body object. We're manually going to create the body object. So we're going to click raw, and we're going to send over some JSON. So let's build this object. So what's the first property we need to send over? Email, right? Okay, and this is JSON, so we need to do double quotes, and we can send an email, right? We didn't validate any specific domain or anything, so we can say harryp@gmail.com, my boy Potter. And then we can say, what's the other property we need? First name, right? Last name. And then the last attribute is password. Okay. But I want to send something that's less than 8 characters because I want to start checking now my validations, right? I want to make sure my validations actually work. So let's see, what is it? How many characters is this? 7? Yep. So we should get an error. Let's try to send it. And it should say, hey, your characters should be minimum 8. And there it is. It's shorter than the minimum allowed length 8. Good. That's something we wanted. Awesome. So now let's correct this. So dragons 1. And then let's get rid of the email to make sure that it makes us require the email. Good. Email is required. So that those 2 validations pass, or meaning they're working. So let's now let them pass. Okay. So this is a valid user object that I can send over. Right. Now let's see who can figure out the security flaw in this. I'm sending the data over, so this should pass everything and store it in my database. Cool. There it is. I know it's in the database because how? How can I tell that it went to the database? Because I got an ID, right? This actually gives me an ID. So what's wrong with this now? Why is there a security flaw? Let's go to my database. Does anybody see anything wrong with this?
Would that be in the URL? That token? When you get it back?
What token?
Will that ID be public or?
Yeah, the ID would be there, yeah. What would be there is everything that we see here.
Yeah,
What's that?
It's going to show all that information. It's not. You shouldn't get that back.
Well, I mean, the IDs, okay, I might care about the ID, but there's something that I care about more than the ID, right? The password is visibly seen. You said that you kept talking about the ID. You're like, the ID is really bad. I don't want them to know Harry's first name. No, but more specifically, the password is very legible, right? It's clear, it's there. Like, that's a big security flaw. You never want to save the actual string password in the database. Can anybody think why? Yeah, I mean, I hire Jose as my, DBA, and he's like, first day on the job, he's like, let me go through the users table.
Instead goes to the website. It's like, oh, he didn't do this.
And then Ted double checks his work. But now the user's table, right, or the user's collection, I can see everyone's password there, right? I know. What's that?
I was gonna say that I know you can access like the database information from the Mongo console and stuff like that, but are there actual files for each
Yeah.
database?
Yeah. A database is just a file, right? So exactly, if someone has access to that file, or if somebody can just go to your data or has access to your database, now they know what everyone's password is, right? So our next goal is to encrypt the password. So what we want to do is we want to take that string and we want to do encryption on that string. We want to change what that string represents into an encrypted version of it. And we want to save that encrypted version in the password field. Exactly, Johan, middleware. Boom. Boom. Okay, so that's the next thing we need to do. So in order for us to do that, we need to bring in a specific package called bcrypt. I need to install it, right? So npm I or npm install bcrypt. Okay, once it's installed, I need to use it. Can anybody guess where I'm going to use it? Good guess, Michael, but no. I'm gonna. What am I trying to do with this package?
Oh.
Encrypt the password, right? Where am I doing all the user stuff? User.js. Because this is where I'm checking the password, right? Okay, so I'm going to require it in here. And then my goal is to encrypt the password before the password gets sent to the database. So if anybody can remember the 3 different methods I could make, remember on the model, remember why that was important. Remember yesterday we did a little bit of review? We had it on the board here. Pre. Good job. Go on. So user schema dot pre. The first argument to pre is what? Pre means before. Before I save it, and then I get a callback function, right? That has next. And now what should I do in here? I have a user, right? We'll call it current user. It's going to be equal to what? This, right? Oh, did I need to make this one a regular function last time because of the arrow?
Yeah.
I did, right? Let's double check. Yeah, because the arrow function takes away that scope. Okay, fine. This looks so weird now to me. Okay, so this is the current user, right? And I want to take that current user and I want to generate a new password. Not a new password, but a encrypted password, right? So I'm literally going to take this code from the npm module. I'm going to E6ify it, ES6ify it. Just add lead in front of it. So this is now going to be the hashed password, right? And then what does it say the two arguments are? The plain text password, which is coming from where? The user. So current user what? So the first argument, let's take a step back. Current user dot password. Okay, that's the plain text. Now salt rounds. Let me quickly explain somewhat of encryption. I'm not going to go too deep into it. This isn't an encryption class or anything. But a salt is how many times you want to mix the characters that you're going to be encrypting, right? So it kind of relates. So you have normally you have a specific subsequent numbers that you're going to be hashing your password against. So it'll be like Y capital X 8V. That's like your primary key. Then you salt it X amount of rounds, meaning I mix, I shake my margarita 5 times and with that key, right? And it just keeps like making it more and more jumbled and more, mixed or whatever, for lack of a better term. So normally it's 8 to 10 is what you want. So, the longer you salt it, the longer it takes to decrypt it, right? The more times you salt it, the longer it takes to decrypt it. So I'm just going to put 8 here, but it's normally a number between 8 and 10 is how many salt rounds you want to do. And the actual key, the salt key, is auto-generated by bcrypt itself. And you'll see it. I'll show you what it is once it gives us the hash password. So that creates the hash password. And then what do we want to do? We want to overwrite the current user password, right? Is now going to equal what? The hash password. Make sense? And then we just say, go on and do your thing. Pretty straightforward, right? Not too much, not too many things going on here. So again, the only special thing that I used from Mongoose was this pre method, right? Which means run this callback function before I save the user to my database. And I know it's before I save it because the first argument is what action I want to do this function before, which is the save. I can do it before update. I can do it before deleting. I can do this pre-method, before any of the CRUD actions. And then I'm just setting a variable. I don't have to do this. I can just use this dot password here if I wanted to, right? But I want to make it very clear to whoever is using my code is that, hey, I'm grabbing the current user, and I'm creating this hash password from bcrypt using the hash sync method, and the two arguments are what is the plain text password and what is the amount of times that I want to mix the letters. Do you guys remember that Blender thing that we did? Imagine running that Blender class 8 times. And then I'm reassigning the password on the user to the new hash password. Okay. And then on line 16, we're saying, just go on and do what you're doing. So I'm going to save this, go to my database, and I'm going to delete this user. Bye. And I'm going to go to postman, and I'm going to send it again and see now what happens if our code is right. Uh-oh. Oh, my server's not on. Whew. Let's say, come on, Tony, you always get it right the first time. What's going on here? Booyah. Now what does our password look like? Can you read that? Does that look like Dragons 1 to you? Michael's like, yeah, I can tell. So there's a salt in here.
So does the salt also increase the length of the
Yeah.
the key?
So there's a salt in here somewhere.
Is that like what you showed us yesterday with the
No, it's not the same with it. It looks kind of, you see the period here, right? The two periods. It's not. This is part of like the actual encryption. Like it's like an actual character. Okay, so it's actually encrypting it now. If I go to my database, now it doesn't say dragons. Let's refresh. It actually has this long encrypted password now. So now, when Jose goes into the database, you can't steal your passwords. And Ted made sure of that. No way, Jose. I'm a hacker. Give me your password.
This guy's hacked this dude while down the street.
All right. Now you might be asking yourself, especially if I'm Kevin, I might be saying, like, but how do I figure out if the password is correct, right? Like, how do I verify that when I go back to log in, that Dragons 1 matches the key, right? How do I make those two things connect to each other? We'll finish this up and then we'll go on lunch break. So that's our next step. I want to take in Dragons 1, check it against my hashed password, and see do they match each other, right? So all this is going to be done in the model. There shouldn't be anywhere else that this happens, right? This all has to do with user data, so it needs to be in the model. So I'm going to use another method. Am I going to use statics or methods? What do you guys think? Statics or methods? Remember?
Method is takes different.
Statics is for the model. Methods is for the document, that one document. So which one do you think am I going to add a function to? Am I going to add a function to methods or to statics? Should it be on the model or should it be to check if the password that's entered in the login form matches the encrypted password?
Static.
Why static?
Because that's what it's
But then static's on the model, right? So you're saying that I'm going to say user.checkPassword? Or should it be
You said statics on the model.
statics is on the model and methods is on a single document? A single document is the answer.
Oh, because you're doing it on this.
Because every document has its own password, right? If the model's checking against, if I want to add a static method to the model, then that's going to check all of my documents, right? Or do something with all the documents. If I do it on just the methods on the schema, that's going to do it on one specific instance. And all the passwords are different, so each one needs to have its own method. So we're going to say user schema.
I don't understand when you say document, like every post request. Document.
No. When I mean document, we're referring to Mongo things. Remember? Let's look at the.
Oh, document as in like the actual.
This is a document,
Data.
right? This is the data. And in SQL terms, we call this a row, right? And then multiple documents together is known as what? What does it say? What is this? Collections, right? So one piece of data is a document. Multiple pieces of data are collections.
You said static came with multiple, right?
Static is for multiple documents.
Collection.
or a collection, yes. And whenever I add to the methods property, it's for a single document. Okay, so we say .methods and we give it a name. We can say verify, check password, whatever we want to call it. We'll say verify PW equals function. And what argument are we probably going to pass in? Huh? The hash password or the string password? String, right? So we'll say text password is going to be the argument, right? And then here we're going to use the bcrypt package to check. So, oops. Oh. Check a password. What do we got to do? Plain text password and the hash. Okay. So this is going to let us know, right? Did or is valid. We're going to create a variable called is valid. Because what does this return? What does this function return here?
That function is returning plain text from that hash.
It's either going to return true or false. Did it match or did it not match? Right? So what are the two arguments that I need to pass in? Plain text password, which is what in our case? Well, it's Dragon's1, but it's going to come in through this function, right? So text PW, and then the hash, where am I going to find the hash from? I should probably have a user, right? The database, right? So I'm going to call this on a document. So again, here we go, right? And then current user dot what? Password. Now this is going to give me a true or false value. And then here I'll just do a check, or you know what? Why don't we become super sick programmers and do ternaries? So if this is true, we'll return let's return an object that says valid, true, and a message successfully logged in. And if it's false, we'll just do the opposite, right? We'll say, oops. We'll say false, and then we'll say incorrect credentials or something. How do you spell credentials? Cool. So we're either going to return valid true, successfully logged in, or we're going to return valid false, message, incorrect credentials, please try again. Yes, they are. And they make you feel pretty cool. That's the best part. What's that? Yeah. We'll be using it.
So mom uses full ternary but not fat arrows?
Well, fat arrows because fat arrows has a specific
Scoping.
scoping issue. Yeah, exactly. Not necessarily an issue, but it helps you with scope. It's supposed to fix that scope.
Which is why this would work on that program.
Right, yeah, because we just have a regular function here. Alright. We need to create a login route. right? So this is the sign up route. Let's create a login route. So login is, what verb is login going to be? What type of request am I making to login? Post, right? Always when I'm sending data, always post. That was a trick question, kind of. Cool. Okay. So from the body, I should get two things when I log in. What are the two things? Username and password. Right? And password. Yeah, let's just do it. Okay. So now, what's it? Remember, we talked about this in the beginning of the session. What's the first thing I need to do? I don't just verify the password right away, right? What do I need to do? When someone logs in, what's the first thing I should I try to do? See if they're in the database, right? Check to see if there's a user. What method should I use on my model to do that?
Stag. db.find.
Yeah, find, right? User.find. But Mongoose gives you a find one method. The first argument is an object, right? So what am I going to say? Username is the username, right? Yes. Oh, wait, sorry. God, Ted, you always got me, man. Email. Jeez, Ted.
I'm starting to think you just mess up and mess with that.
You never know. Maybe I am.
Why sometimes we use this and sometimes we use rec.body? When I look at my understanding that
Because you use a fat arrow, so if you use a fat arrow, that is
Well, we're using rec.body because that's being sent through the HTTP request. The data is being sent through the headers, request object, body, property. When we use the keyword this, we're in the model and we're going to call that function on our user object, right?
Okay.
So we need to say this to specify that user object. Okay, so this stuff is coming from a request. Yeah.
It takes that rec.body, whatever's getting from rec.body, once the HTTP request is completed, then the model sees whatever came from rec.body as this.
Yeah, correct. Yep, exactly. Good job. Wheaties. Good for you. Okay, so we're checking to see if a user exists, right? And we're going to execute this callback. So we should have an error, or we should get the user, right? So first I'm going to say if there's an error, let's send that back to the server. Else if there's a user, what should I do? Nope. So for my first check, if there's an error, meaning something happened on the server, right? Send that error back. Else if there is a user, what do I need to do now? Well, we said, okay, now there's a user in the database. We found them by the email. What's the second part we need to do? Compare the passwords, right? So I need to call the function that I just created on the user. What did I call that function? Verify PW. So how do I call it on my document? User.verify, and this is the difference between the static method versus the regular methods on the schema. And I pass in what? What is PW taken as an argument?
Well, the plain text.
Yep. Yep. So where am I getting that from? Nope.
The body.
Yeah. Password.
Yeah.
So I just thought about something. If this will be an error if it doesn't find a user, right? So we don't need to check for the user. What we do need to do is this in here. Does that make sense? I switched two things around. So this is take a look. We had it like this before, and I just saw something while we were building this. There will be an error if the user is not found. Does that make sense? So this error object will be fulfilled if a user does not exist. So if the user doesn't exist, then this error will be found. Send it back to the server or to the client. So our next check is to see if this is valid. Because this sends back what? A Boolean. Or no, it sends back an object actually. What did we say? Valid. Right? So let's take a look. Let's go to our user. This is going to return an object that has valid inside of it. So I'm checking in the if statement, passing in the password, which is going to return the object, and I'm saying, is it true or false? If it's valid, then we're going to res.json, and we're going to send, we actually should send, yeah. We should send this back, actually. Let's think of a better way to do this. Let's think of a better way to do this. Okay, I'm going to break this up. I'm going to set it to a variable. I'm going to say db response is equal to the return of that, right? And then I'm going to check db response dot valid. If it is, then I'm going to send back the db response. Makes sense? Else, I'm going to send back still the db response, but it's going to have that message. Okay. I still don't like this code. db response is from here. It's these two objects.
Okay, so you're just calling it that now.
Yeah. Eventually, this code right here doesn't make sense because it's the same thing. I'm sending back the same thing, right? So like, why am I sending back the same thing? But eventually, I'm going to create a token here. If it's valid, create the token and send it to the client. If it's not valid, send them back. You didn't log in successfully. No token. Try again.
And that would be part of the DB response element.
Right. Yeah. So right now, it doesn't make sense. So let's just get rid of this and just send back the DB response.
Can we tell it if the valid property is true?
Yeah. Yeah, we can, but right now it doesn't make sense because we're sending back the same thing. It's either true or false, right? Eventually, we're going to give them that token if it's true, right? We're not there yet. Okay. So I think this covers it. Oops. There we go. There we go. All right, so let's walk through this one more time. We created on the model a verify password method, which is going to be used on each document to verify the password against the encrypted password. So as the argument, we're taking in the text password. We're setting a variable from the current user to this. We're checking the text password against the hash password using bcrypt, and specifically the compare sync method, which should return a Boolean value. We're doing a ternary that says if it's true, return this object that has valid true successfully logged in. If it's false, return false, and the message is incorrect credentials, please try again.
What is the ternary, the question mark, and
The question mark and the colon.
you can only use that in
You can use it in anything JavaScript. Okay, and then in the route, we retrieve the email and the password from the body, and we're saying find one user document based off of that email. If after we search, execute this callback function. If there's an error, let's send that back. Else, if there's no error, let's get the user's password from the form, check against our model verify password function. That should give me that object back that we just saw, and let's send that object to the client. Okay? So I'm going to go to postman, create another route. I'm going to do post, but instead of sign up, it's going to be login. The body now is going to have a user email and a password. Okay. And if I log in with the correct credentials, this should return. Let me make sure my server's on. Uh-oh. Okay. I forgot the arrow. That arrow's making you lazier when you code. Okay, so that's good. That should be fine. Everything should be green now. There we go. Now I'm going to send this request over, and I should get the object that says valid, true, you successfully logged in. Didn't get it. Lowercase p. Got it. So I should probably lowercase that when I grab it in, right? So let me restart the server. So let's add that to the code. Okay. So now it should be fine. If I send the capital P, it should still work. Okay. Okay, there we go. Valid, true, message, successfully logged in. Now if I send, maybe I forgot to send the 1, and I just put dragons, we get false, incorrect credentials, please try again. Okay? Any questions about that login process? All right, let's take a break, hour break for lunch. Go grab some food, stretch, look at this code. We'll come back, we'll cover what we did this morning, and then we'll start doing the token authentication stuff.